Okay. Hello, everyone, and welcome to tonight's webinar, Nature and Your Health, Getting the Most from Your Time in Nature. I'm Rachel Toker, President of Urban Ecosystem Restorations, or UER, and I'm pleased to welcome our special guest, Phil Hosmer, Executive Director of our co-sponsor for tonight's webinar, NatureWorx.
Thank you, Rachel.
Thank you for being here. This topic is one of the closest to my heart, and I'm so glad that you all can attend tonight. There's a lot of important conversation to be had around nature and health, and I look forward to the conversation that we'll have after the presentation. This webinar is brought to you in connection with UER's Short Street Preserve and Nature Play Space project, which is funded by the City of Gaithersburg and the Chesapeake Bay Trust. This webinar is also supported by our partner in the Short Street Project, the Lakelands Community Association. Before we start, let me share just a bit about what UER is and does. UER is a nonprofit urban land trust that creates, protects, and aggregates what we call eco-functioning spaces. And then we engage people with these spaces in ways that respect nature while allowing people to thrive. We'll talk more about eco-functioning spaces later in the program. This evening, we want to take you on a journey where we explore how natural ecosystems work, what it takes for these systems to function at a healthy level, how exposure to healthy local ecosystems benefits our bodies, and finally, what we need to do to get our local ecosystems healthy again and restore these benefits to ourselves and our communities. More specifically, tonight's agenda covers ecosystem basics. When is nature healthy? Body basics. How can nature make us healthier? The what, where, and how. What kinds of nature make the biggest difference for getting the maximum health benefit, and how we can get that benefit across a wide spectrum of health needs, why it's so important to get this right in the urban space, and finally, real-world examples of how this all works for a range of populations and why nature play can be a particularly good option in urban and suburban spaces. So let's get started. I want to start by placing us all in context. Every piece of land is part of a larger landscape and a set of differently sized ecosystems. As you think about property and green space that you own, manage, or enjoy, remember that it performs certain ecological functions on site, and it functions as part of a set of natural systems, all nested within each other, interacting all the time. In fact, ecosystems can range in size from global to micro. They're both much bigger and much smaller in scale than the properties you own and inhabit. But let's review what an ecosystem is. Ecosystems are the natural systems in which we live. They're defined by the functional relationships among individuals, communities, and their non-living environment. These relationships are dynamic and complex, and they change over time. But let's break that down. Within an ecosystem, we see cycles and transformation of matter and energy moving and changing across land, air, and water bodies, both above and below the ground surface. There are a mix of plant species that have a history of coexisting in communities together, and a mix of animal communities that have evolved to live in those plant communities, all of which are driving matter and energy through the system. And all of these species produce successive generations that interact over space and time. Just like our bodies, our nervous system, circulatory system, and digestive system, to name a few, they're all performing their own particular functions, all while interacting with each other and working together to make our bodies work as a whole. Ecosystems can be healthy or unhealthy. How do we know when an ecosystem is healthy? In a healthy ecosystem, all the subsystems are working together and interacting with each other in the ways they've evolved to operate. We know ecosystems are healthy when these drivers and indicators are present. First, biological and genetic diversity, meaning diverse forms of plant and animal life. Interaction diversity, meaning if we look at all the species interacting, plants and animals, do they feed off each other? Do they use each other to reproduce? Are they supporting each other's health in ways we may or may not notice? This is where an evolutionary history together really matters. There is structural diversity and complexity, and usually where different species or species of different ages and the non-living features in the environment are occupying different areas or niches within the space. There's regular cycling of materials and energy through the system that's happening consistently. And so, for example, here in this picture, you see dead leaves and microorganisms that are driving nutrient cycling, in this case through decomposition, in a way that contributes to soil and plant health and stores carbon in the soil. The land area is of a sufficient size to serve the animal and plant populations that are relying on that ecosystem. And there's clear generational succession, meaning that you can see young, middle-aged, and old species moving through generational succession. These are the site-specific features, and areas with these features are often referred to as high-quality nature. There are two other that we're going to discuss, which is connectivity of ecosystems to each other, and resilience of the space that you can see after shocks or disturbances hit the area. When you're out and about, I encourage you to look for these indicators. Take a mental note of where you see healthy and high quality nature around where you live, work, and play. As I mentioned, those other two non-site specific aspects relate to regional ecosystem health. So in today's world, we increasingly need to improve not only the quality of our natural areas, but we need to expand the quantity of those high quality natural spaces and connect intact ecosystems to one another. These connections enable smaller ecosystems to be resilient and recover from shocks, in addition to expanding the total amount of high quality nature that different species can access to meet their basic needs. So why should we care? Why do we care about ecosystem health? Healthy ecosystems produce a wide range of what we call ecosystem services. Some of them are essential for urban societies to operate on a daily basis. Some of these, like outdoor temperature regulation and air filtration, meaning clean air, water filtration or clean water, water cycling and flood management, carbon absorption and sequestration, and the maintenance of food webs, which used to be called food chains for those who grew up when I did, which are necessary for food production. There's a set of ecosystem services that are need to have. That when people try to perform them without nature's help are very costly and require intensive inputs of energy and resources, and that's if people can perform them at all. Healthy ecosystems create the context and circumstances that we all need to live, grow, and survive through future generations. In fact, many of these need-to-have services are only delivered from within or very near to the micro ecosystems that are producing them. So for example, air pollutant removal only happens in and around the ecosystem. Heat island management, flood management. These are simple examples of how certain benefits only occur within or within close proximity to the ecosystem itself. And health benefits are one of those really important hyperlocal ecosystem services. Before we move on, I want to be very clear on this point. You can only cultivate the drivers of ecosystem health with the right kinds of land covers. And they must incorporate biodiversity and structural diversity and interaction diversity. These land covers, buildings, pavement, compacted soils, cultivated or artificial turf grass, and invasive species are the predominant urban land covers of today, and they are hallmarks of ecosystem damage. In looking at this range of ecological quality, we can see on the left side the characteristics of high quality that we talked about: diversity, complexity, cycling of matter and energy, and so on. That's on the left. And then you can see a progression of deterioration of ecosystem health as we move from the left to the right. Even in our designated urban green spaces, there is a spectrum of ecological quality. I created this visual to evaluate the kinds of nature we normally see in the urban space. The upper ends of this are high quality because they carry most of the key attributes of a healthy ecosystem, even if fragmented. Unfortunately, much urban green space does not qualify as high quality. And let's take a look at why this is so important for health. So let's dive in to our nature health basics. I'm going to share with you the academic research, some of which I conducted myself, that underscores why each of us needs lots of time in high quality nature to be healthy, and why we need it where we live, work, and play. After I review some of the research, Phil Hosmer will share some real-world examples of how these principles apply in his work, and then I'll talk about the Short Street project and our nature play model, and we can open up for conversation. So at a high level, research is showing that the benefits of exposure to high quality urban nature range from reducing high blood glucose levels, reducing blood pressure, adrenaline, and cortisol levels, improving heart rate variability and ventricular function, improving lung health, improving immune system function, and improving concentration and cerebral blood flow. And the research is continuing to expand and evolve these findings. If we look at the kinds of diseases or disease precursors that these exposures could prevent or mitigate, we see the opportunity to prevent and treat some of the most prevalent chronic conditions in US cities today, including heart disease, diabetes, cancer, respiratory diseases, depression and anxiety, and attentional disorders like ADHD. And I want to note that many of these diseases disproportionately affect communities of color, low-income populations, and environmental justice communities. Nature experiences can also restore normal gut biota, especially in children, which improves long-term immune system function and reduces allergies. It is also shown to improve sleep-wake cycles, mental concentration, and general feelings of well-being. Given the range of benefits from nature experiences, they can serve a spectrum of wellness benefits, meaning everything from daily wellness to targeted disease prevention, to treatment, and in some cases to rehabilitation. We don't actually know why or how nature has all of these effects on the body. Researchers have offered a number of theories over the last few decades to try to explain this, some of which view nature as incidental to the primary health intervention, like outdoor physical activity or meditation outside, where it's the physical activity of the meditation that is the primary intervention. Many view nature as triggering certain mental states that produce physical effects, like stress reduction therapy and attention restoration therapy. However, at least one hypothesis, the biodiversity hypothesis, for which there's growing evidence, argues that it is the actual physical interactions between our bodies and an unpolluted, biodiverse natural world that enriches the chemical and hormonal processes of the human body. Whether these are all or just a part of the explanation, it's an important consideration when we choose what kinds of nature we want to surround ourselves with. So what does the evidence show that makes the most difference for maximizing health benefits? Though there's much we don't know, there's certain patterns and principles that we do know. Based on my research, the three most important spatial temporal features for optimal health outcomes are first, the dose of nature exposure, meaning the extent that high quality nature is present in the space and the length of time an individual remains exposed to that space. In most cases, and we'll talk about this more in a second, we want to maximize ecological quality and quantity so that we're immersed in biodiverse nature. Second is the geographic proximity to the individual, meaning the nature space must be physically close by and easy to access. This matters both for the hyperlocal environmental benefits one gets from local ecosystems like pollutant reduction and heat island mitigation. And it also supports the third element, which is frequency, meaning how often does the person expose themselves to the natural space over time? And generally, more is better. So if we dive into dose, let's look at what kind and how much. With regard to dosage, if we go back to the nature spectrum, we know that, we see that in most cases, we want to be at or near the top of the spectrum because high quality nature seems to provide the most health benefit. This is likely because the biodiversity, species richness, and structural complexity of high quality nature all use the full range of physiological and psychological mechanisms that we believe cause health benefits in the body. So for example, abundant high quality nature provides a sense of immersion. It creates a context in which the person can be present and focused on what's happening in the space. It involves the animal communities and structural complexity that deliver visual and auditory novelty. These spaces deliver shade, cooler temperatures, clean air, and other aspects of healthy ecosystems that appear to positively affect our bodies, whether we understand them yet or not. As far as the amount of time you need to spend in nature during a visit to absorb all the benefits, practitioners widely disagree. But many do agree that a minimum of somewhere between 20 minutes and 2 hours of exposure is optimal. It's important to note, though, that there are both synergies and trade-offs between the duration of an exposure, which I'm talking about as part of dose, and the frequency of visits over time. Whatever the reasons, certain high-quality nature settings can treat a wide range of diseases if they're designed and planned to do so. And where appropriate, a high-quality nature space can incorporate additional features that meet a specific subset of health needs. So for example, active nature play structures for children, or ramps for rehabilitation therapy, or private nooks for more solitary, calming environments. Now let's look at proximity and frequency, where and how often. We want to maximize proximity and frequency. Generally, we want weekly, if not daily interactions. The shorter the dose exposure, meaning your time in the space, the more important it is to have that experience more frequently. But how easy is this to do? For many people, it's not easy at all. However, if we regenerate large numbers of forest patches and other high quality nature spaces in urban neighborhoods, and we ensure easy access to these spaces, we can improve health in these areas while maximizing ecological impact. And particularly in highly impervious areas that are extremely susceptible to heat islands, we can make a huge difference on health and ecology at the same time. In this aerial view and heat map of Washington, D.C., you can see there is no lack of opportunity to replace impervious surfaces with high quality nature. But there are a few more features that really matter to get the maximum health benefit out of a space. And there are three factors that are extremely important. One is a sense of safety in the space and among the participants. Two is some level of crowd control or controlled occupancy. And three is health programming that teaches participants how to get the most benefit out of the nature experience for their particular wellness concerns. Both design and programming of these spaces have to be disease and trauma informed. Programming is often an essential piece of ensuring wellness or treatment because it's designed to connect people to the nature space in specific ways targeted to their health concern. Often it connects individuals to supportive communities. It can build healing relationships and personal insights, and it facilitates a sense of safety. It can also design the nature experience to channel participant attention and focus in ways tailored to produce maximum health benefit based on an individual or group needs. So let's look at why this is so important to get right in the urban space. Why do I propose to you that it is paramount that we figure out how to get to the center here? This is why. The predominant urban land covers we saw before are growing as urban footprints grow. In turn, they cause or exacerbate everything from flooding and pollution to widespread mental health and chronic disease. Most of us are not aware of how deeply these problems are connected to the loss of nature where we live, work, and play. As climate change progresses, extreme heat will be more frequent, which will aggravate air pollution and many chronic diseases. Flooding will also place us at increased risk. But let's just look at chronic disease for a second. When we do, we see cardiovascular disease affects 1 in 3 or more than 83 million people, and heart attack and stroke are the first and third leading causes of death in the United States. Death rates from heart disease and stroke are 37% higher among African Americans than whites, and American Indian and Alaskan Natives have the highest percentage of premature death from cardiovascular disease. More than 1/3 of the population is overweight or obese, which is associated with increased risk of type 2 diabetes, hypertension, high cholesterol, heart disease, stroke, respiratory illnesses, and some cancers. Mental illness is also prevalent and can adversely affect the outcomes of other chronic diseases. ADHD, anxiety problems, behavior problems, and depression are commonly diagnosed mental disorders in children, and depression and anxiety are increasing over time. At the same time, as urban areas grow, they become increasingly essential components of ecosystem function and stability. In fact, metro regions are becoming ever more important for connecting and expanding hubs of biodiversity for regional ecosystem health. And we need healthy ecosystems to provide ecosystem services and climate resilience. Some urban regions are taking action to build corridors that help wildlife and improve human health. Here's an example of what one urban region is doing to build connectivity through their urban spaces and support its regional ecosystem. To get to our center goal, we must look again at the urban nature spectrum and recognize that high quality urban nature, abundantly distributed across cities, that is carefully used and maintained for health and ecological purposes can get us there. Eco-functioning spaces are a type of landscape are created under a set of guidelines and parameters designed to help us achieve high quality nature in the urban space. Eco-functioning spaces focus on restoring the drivers of ecosystem health and strengthening the system's foundations. And when we do this, we wind up addressing multiple environmental challenges simultaneously and maximizing health benefits too. So let's look at examples of how we can restore landscapes for ecosystem health and then use them to improve human health and treat diseases. And now I welcome Phil Hosmer.
Thank you so much, Rachel. I really appreciate you having me here today. It's great to be with everyone. I think I'm a living, breathing proof of the biophilia hypothesis. That is that humans have an innate fascination and a need to connect with the natural world, because that's me for most of my life. I've always felt better when I was outdoors. I never really thought about why until about 5 years ago. I started to do some research into why people feel better outdoors. And I came across many of the studies and research papers that you've mentioned, Rachel. And it inspired me to create a nonprofit called NatureWorx. And our mission is to help people find ways in their own lives to connect with nature in a very personal way that's meaningful for them. And we do that through experiential programs that we've designed using evidence-based approaches. And we've created a team of professionals. And I'll walk you through a little bit about that, okay? So I founded NatureWorx in 2017, building off of existing research from all over the world, actually. Many of you may have heard of something called forest bathing or forest therapy that originated in Japan in the 1980s. That really serves as the underpinning of our program. And we layer onto that elements of meditation and mindfulness, and also some naturalist interpretation as a way of setting context. But we try to make our program really enjoyable because we want to inspire people to get out there. One of the big problems in our society is that people are indoors. On average, Americans are indoors 93% of their day, which to me is just tragic. And we're looking at screens between 10 and 12 hours a day. And we check our cell phones on average 100 times a day. So we've been consumed by these screens, and we're not using any of our senses, and we're not going outdoors at all. And we're having all of these health problems as a result. So we really see NatureWorx as hopefully a bit of an antidote to that. We want to make it enjoyable, as I said, and we also tailor our program to meet groups where they are. So we work with specific populations, and I'll tell you a bit more about that, okay? So one of our main goals initially was to make sure we were able to document outcomes. We think that's really important in an emerging field like nature connection. So we have all of our participants complete a pre and post survey that documents certain indicators around stress, anxiety, depression, and we've been able to document our outcomes from the very first session that we did back in 2017. And as I said earlier, we blend a lot of different approaches. We have an amazing team of guides who come from a lot of different backgrounds. Some of them are counselors or educators. We have people who work for Outward Bound as Outward Bound leaders. We have REI educators on our team. We have people who worked at nature centers. But what they all share is a passion for helping others connect with nature in a personal, meaningful way that they will hopefully want to repeat. So it's very experiential and hands-on. And as I said earlier, we really want to strive for outcomes. That's been our intent, okay? So some of the groups that we've worked with, I'm going to give you a few little sort of thumbnail sketches on how our program actually works in real life. So one of our first clientele were people who were recovering from substance use disorder. We've been particularly successful with this group. I'm going to get into some outcomes here in a minute. But many people who are recovering from substance use disorder have a co-occurring condition, whether it's mental health, behavioral health, emotional health, that they've been treating themselves with substances. So we try to help them build coping and resiliency skills, and also to find joy in life in a way that doesn't involve substances. So we try to tailor our program with that population to really bring that forward, both the coping piece and also just the fun element. We also work in Baltimore with, we talked earlier about environmental justice, and equity of access, we work with a neighborhood in South Baltimore, Curtis Bay, Brooklyn, and several parks in that area. We've created an initiative to help people connect with nature and for nature to connect with the community. So we work with other nonprofits in South Baltimore to bring our programs to Masonville Cove. I'm not sure how many of you are familiar with Masonville Cove, but it's a wonderful example of creating a quality biodiverse green space from what formerly was a contaminated Superfund site on the water on the Patapsco River. It's now got hundreds of species of birds that come through. It's got bald eagles that nest there. And we do our program right there with people who formerly had never been invited to experience Masonville Cove. So that's another one of our partnerships. Another one that's pretty interesting is in Hartford County, Maryland. There's a teen court program that takes teens who have had behavioral issues in school, and it tries to address the core problems the students are having rather than them going into the juvenile justice system. The intent of this teen court program is to help kids build coping skills and resiliency skills and find other supportive allies in their health. And we bring NatureWorx to that population, and we've geared our program to really meet kids where they are, many of whom, again, never get outside. So we have to literally introduce them to the concept of nature as a part of their life, as an ally for them, and something that can support them. So we also work with a variety of other populations, as you'll see here on the sheet. And we, like as I said earlier, we can tailor our program. We have a guide a handbook for our guides that has about 75 different experiential activities that we use on any given day that can be tailored according to the needs of the client. Okay. So here's some outcomes. We've been fortunate to work with the University of Maryland School of Social Work, and they have taken all of our survey data and collected and analyzed and have reported on that data now. And the preliminary results are very encouraging. We've actually been able to prove a reduction in symptoms amongst people who are in recovery from substance use who participate in our program. So we've seen, as you'll see here, reductions in anxiety, depression, cravings to use substances. Particularly interesting, those with high cravings, when they come out with us, we show the biggest reduction in folks who have a higher level of cravings before they come out on a NatureWorx session. Also, an 89% report they feel more connected to the natural world after our session, and 95% say that they've learned ways that nature could support their recovery. So we intend to do further research with the University of Maryland and probably publish a paper coming out of this work, because we think that nature and substance use, it's a really a natural fit for people in recovery, and we want to explore that further. Okay. Here's some outcomes from other populations that we work with. We also do sessions that are open to the general public. If you go to our website, natureworx.org, we have an events tab, and we have free sessions that are open to the public. I invite anyone on this call who's interested to come to one of our free sessions, because we also do surveys amongst the general population, and the statistics there track very similarly to the folks from the substance use recovery population. 94% report they learn ways nature can support their health and well-being. 3/4 report a reduction in symptoms of depression or anxiety or stress. And then finally, with the teen group we work with in teen court, you'll see that 92% who have participated agree that time in nature can help reduce stress, and 86% say that being in nature can help them cope with problems more effectively. So it's funny, you know, I hadn't met Rachel until about a year or so ago, but we sort of found each other, and it's amazing how, you know, her research has dovetailed with what we've actually documented, right? We've documented that urban spaces can really improve people's health, and we've shown that it works. And, you know, we want to do more. We want to reach more people, and we want to continue to grow this, because we're really seeing an impact, which is really gratifying professionally for me. So that's kind of a high level of what we do, and I'm happy to entertain questions at the end of this. Thank you.
I left myself on mute. Thank you, Phil, for the great work that you do and for these examples of how important health programming within healthy nature is for our communities.
Thank you.
I want to take one more minute to talk about the benefits of nature play in urban and suburban spaces. Too often, people see high quality urban nature as space reserved for non-humans, while they view traditional urban land covers as our space or for us. This is a major psychological and behavioral barrier to expanding high quality urban nature and getting the health outcomes that we all want to see. It's one that produces less space for each use. But nature play is about playing in and with nature. It's not nature on the side. This is not where the environment gets its share and we get ours. This is where we share the space and we get a larger space for both of us in the process and healthier lives at the same time. At Short Street, this is a picture of what Short Street looked like before, when it was just a stormwater management basin. We're converting an underutilized stormwater management basin into an area entirely planted with native plant communities, including widespread tree cover that will absorb stormwater and replenish the soils. These are some interim pictures as the restoration has unfolded, where we're incorporating nature play into the center of the space with a walking or running path that's surrounded by neighborhood artwork that all together promotes active play and games for younger children, and it promotes interaction with and deeper understandings of the surrounding plants and larger ecosystems for everyone, kids of all ages. We've incorporated the artwork through clay art tiles that have expressions of people's views about nature on the nature poles. And we've started to run neighborhood programs in the space. We continue to hope that the community will meet, run, or talk together in the space. And enabling these kinds of activities and programs within an eco-functioning space is a living example of how we can create healthier spaces by integrating our goals instead of siloing them. I can't wait to show you pictures of the space, flourishing once all the baby plants and have grown and the stakes are out. So to put this all together, in closing, it's essential to create, support, and steward high quality urban nature that serves ecological needs and supports our health. We want it to increase these land uses and land covers, these biodiverse, high quality land covers, often using nature play as an option across urban neighborhoods. We want nature that's located nearby so people can access it daily, and we can rebuild ecological connections. We need to manage it both for health and ecological purposes, though. And wherever possible, we should incorporate trained individuals or organizations to run nature experiences and nature therapy programs that address particular health needs using these nature spaces within the local communities. This is how we get to the center and create a brighter future for our families and the broader society as a whole. And now we'll be delighted to open it up for conversation and questions. Let me stop share.